This episode is brought to you by the American Homebrewers Association, organizers of the 23rd Annual Learn to Homebrew Day, coming up on Saturday, November 6th. Learn to Homebrew Day is an opportunity to celebrate and spread the joy of the most rewarding and delicious hobby of all time. To encourage new and longtime homebrewers to join the fun, the AHA invites you to take $5 off a print or digital membership with the code LEARN2BREW21. That's learn the number 2, brew 21. Visit homebrewersassociation.org/LTHD to learn more and get involved. homebrewersassociation.org/LTHD. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 28th, 2021. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Dan Schreffler from Space-Time Mead and Cider Works shares a mead made with yeast that's been to space, or at least as far as Shatner went. Steve and I also taste 3 more delicious Space-Time meads as well. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, and if you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our brewers' logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Financial supporters have already seen the video episode that Steve and I shot last week tasting my Hungry Jack Pancake Syrup Double. I think it turned out really well, and Steve liked it too. And if you don't like my choice of sugar, you can substitute one of your own, traditional or off the wall, using the base recipe that I used. And I think you'd be pretty happy with it. We also recorded another show tasting Steve's Martzen, which was not off the wall, but also delicious. And afterwards, Steve and I got together to record the audio tasting that you'll hear in this episode, and I did a lot of editing on that one to fit into the time, because we got carried away with the obscure cultural references and the dad jokes and stuff. So I'm going to do something that I haven't done before. I'm going to release to financial supporters this week the entire uncut tasting, including all the bad dad jokes and obscure cultural references that didn't make it into this week's show. So this show is all about mead, and our sponsors Ricky and Kelly from Groenfell Meadery in Vermont have some fun mead news. Ricky, the mead maker, says Groenfell's Ancient Collection is coming back, including Veneer, which is available for pre-sale right now on Groenfell.com. Veneer is Groenfell's testament to the great meads of antiquity, made with pure wildflower honey, fermented on 3 European strains of yeast, aged on carved ash, wood, and oak, and named in honor of the Norse gods who inspired it. Veneer is 15.9% ABV, so it's quite a bit stronger than the usually quaffable craft meads from Groenfell and Havoc. You can make it a full set by ordering the other ancient collection meads, Hegyr and Bagai, from the Ancient Collection while you're at it, and you can get free shipping across the country for orders over $70. Check out all the deliciousness from family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's GROENNFELL. Let's take a very quick jump into the mailbag for a question that I get a lot, so I tend to repeat the answer here in the show for new folks that are tuning in. Jake from Tulsa wrote, I'm currently fermenting my first attempt at brew in a bag. It's been exactly a week today that it's been fermenting, and it seems like the off-gassing from the airlock, not sure if that's the correct term for that, has really slowed down. If it stops completely but hasn't fermented in 2 weeks, is it okay to go ahead and start to bottle, or should I add DMA, otherwise known as DME, to try to kick the fermentation back up a little? Well, this is the answer I've given a bunch on the show, but it's worth repeating for new brewers, especially this time of year when the temperatures are changing and you might see some airlock activity. It might be due to that. The best way to tell if your beer or wine or mead or kombucha or, well, not kombucha, but makgeolli. The best way that you could tell, well, I guess not with makgeolli either. Anyway, the best way to tell if your stuff is finished fermenting is to take a gravity reading. You can't necessarily depend on the airlock activity. I use a hydrometer, mainly so I can taste the sample, but you can use a refractometer. But you got to use a calculator online or in your software to compensate for the presence of alcohol, because if you just try to rely on a refractometer reading, post-fermentation, without doing that, you'll get a false reading. If the number is at or close to your predicted final gravity, you're good to go. So Jake replied, "Thanks. I've done 3 extract kits now, and I'm very excited to taste the difference between the 2 methods. You were right." That's 3 words that I'd like to hear. My final gravity looked great, so I went ahead and bottled. Well, excellent. Good luck with that, Jake, and I'm sure that you'll be very happy with your all-grain efforts. Okay, let's talk to Dan Schreffler from Space Time Mead and Cider Works in Pennsylvania about making mead with yeast that's been to space. Dan Schreffler, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, James.
Now, this is a fun show. One reason is that Steve and I got to get together and taste some delicious meads. But another reason is because this part of the show, at least 25% of the show, is sort of based on a previous episode of this show, right?
Yeah. It was an awesome opportunity to build on what you had shared with the world.
Now, bring us back in time to the conversation, and I looked at it was from the episode, the July 1st episode of 2020, my conversation with Nick Tier about sending yeast to space, sort of like William Shatner. But attaching, yeast on a weather balloon with a GPS thing and sending it up to the edge of space, and the weather balloon pops and the package, including the yeast, floats back down. And then we did a comparative beer tasting, trying to figure out whether, the high altitude or the extreme temperatures or whatever had any effect on the yeast. But then I take it that you got inspiration from that.
Oh, gosh, yeah. So first of all, they have yeast that's in space yeast. And we are Space-Time Mead and Cider Works. So we had to pursue this, yes. Nick Tier, who was on your show and actually now has a BYO magazine article about it. Last fall, him and Dan Lepode and his students were given an opportunity to send these experiments into space. It's part of a group called Edge of Space Missions. And they were allowed to send up a certain amount of payload. And so I don't know if this was an official package that was put on, or the homebrew guy decides I'll smuggle it on board. I don't know what the full story of that, how it made it into space, but we definitely want to get our hands on the yeast. So you were kind enough to share Nick's information with me, and I reached out to him. And here it turns out that his family is just down the road from me.
Oh,
so yeah, he's they're 40 minutes down the road from where I am in Dunmore. His mom still lives, so he drove up and brought 2 mason jars full of this space exposed Nottingham ale yeast.
Wow!
So pretty.
So it's kismet. It's meant to be.
Yes. Everywhere in the multiverse this has happened, so we just had to execute on it. Yes. Yeah, so it was really, really cool because they did a triangle test to see if they could differentiate between the space yeast and the non-space yeast, and I think they were able to discern some difference in the flavor.
Yeah, I can't remember the results of our experiment. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that episode. But it certainly didn't hurt things to send it out there and to expose it to gamma rays or whatever, even though it was in a foil pouch, so they should have cut down a little bit at least on, radiation and things like that.
No, and that's why we're intrigued. Just the novelty of space yeast, and also does it make a difference? Is it going to impart any particular flavors or not on it? And So we wanted to do a small batch. We just ultimately it was just a 25-gallon batch just to see what would happen and how would it turn out. And we're actually pretty pleased with the results.
So last year, you and I on the June 18th, 2020 episode of Basic Brewing Radio, you and I had an extended conversation about your meadery and for example, your nutrient techniques, and lots of information about the nitty gritty of how you kind of run your business and how you make your meads. So I encourage people to go back and listen to that episode, to get more background on who you are and how you do what you do. But you sent us 4 meads to sample, and so I want to get more into detail kind of on each of those meads. So what was the mead that you chose to spacify?
So what we wanted to do was really highlight what is the yeast going to contribute to the flavor. So we didn't want to make a sweet mead. We designed this to be a dry mead. Ideally, there'd be really no residual sugar, just to really see what is the yeast contributing to this. Is it going to be off? Is it going to taste all right? So we started with an original gravity of like 1076. And then wanted to see what would happen. And this thing fermented fairly dry, 0.996, given 10.6% alcohol. So the yeast had no problem eating through this. We do our typical. We let it sit on primary for a month. Then we racked it, let it sit for another month, and then ultimately we did some stabilization with sulfites and some clarifying, with Keosocel, and then we polish filtered it just to clean it up in the bottle because we liked the way it tasted, and we thought it was at the end of the day, we thought it was going to be a nice substitute for a dry white grape wine, except honey based.
And the name of the mead is the Edge of Space.
Edge of Space.
Is it still available on your website?
Yes, it is. We have quite a bit of it left. And in fact, the label is actually from the GoPro image from the actual balloon. It was provided by Dan Lepode for us, and we did a little Photoshop to blur it a bit, but it is the actual image that took place from that high altitude balloon.
Hey, everybody, just a quick note. Dan wanted me to tell you that he's offering a package deal for the 4 meads that we're tasting on this episode. If you go to spacetimemeadworks.com, you can find the Basic Brewing Tasting Pack and get 10% off the regular price. Then you can see if your taste buds match up with mine and with Steve's. spacetimemeadworks.com. Cool. And what was the honey that you used with it?
Local wildflower honey. We source our honey from a couple local apiaries. This one came from the Beekeeper's Daughter. They're just about 30 minutes down the road, and they have their hives all over northeastern Pennsylvania. So just good old. I think it was fall blossom. It actually was a mix of fall and summer blossom from 2020 harvest, actually.
And so you just went straight basic mead, nothing fancy, no actual additional flavorings or anything that would kind of mask any kind of effect that the yeast would have on it. So have you fermented a mead with Nottingham before, and was this any different from other uses of that or any other beer yeasts that you could tell?
Well, I've used beer yeast before, but we haven't used Nottingham Ale. I take it back. I did Nottingham Ale many years ago as an amateur home brewer. And of course, what we were just talking about earlier was memory does not serve me well a lot of times. So, so to me, this was a fresh. We I guess we should have got another batch, and did a control or something like that. We just were more interested in, can we make a decent mead? One with Nottingham Ale, and Nottingham Ale that was exposed to space. My assessment of this is the space really didn't do anything to it. It turned out really, really clean. It fermented nicely. There's no lag at all. It acted just like any other. Actually, it acted like any other wine yeast we would use to produce our meads.
So, what is beer yeast in general? I imagine each strain has a different characteristic, but what do beer yeasts in general bring to mead that your typical wine and or mead yeasts don't?
It seems to me it's somewhat less of an alcohol tolerant. So other than flavor profile, because of the nature of the yeast, an Irish ale versus an Abbey ale versus SO5, they're going to contribute different flavor profiles. But ultimately, in terms of characteristics, they're pretty close. I mean, I could put enough nutrient addition and care and feed and drive a beer yeast to 14 to 16%. So
Wow.
I don't really see a difference other than they were never propagated to ferment honey or grape or something. But these things are pretty interchangeable. So you have a lot of tools to your palate that if we think outside if you look outside the grape wine toolbox or the cider toolbox or the beer toolbox and say, listen, depending what I want to build, I'm going to use these different tools. And the only way to really try it out is you take the same batch of mead, you make a 20-gallon batch of mead, split it, and then pitch the different yeasts and see what happens with them. And we've done a number of those experiments, both as a home brewer and as a commercial winery.
So Steve and I got together and shot a couple episodes of the video podcast, and then afterwards I forced him to sit down and sample meads with me. So here's Steve and me sitting in the kitchen and sampling the Edge of Space. Steve Wilkes, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks, James. It's a pleasure to be back.
Enjoying retirement?
I'm loving it every second.
You look relaxed.
Well, we've already taped 2 shows today.
You've had 2 1/2 of beers.
Yes.
So now you're going to have some sips of some meads. So you may be even more relaxed.
I'm sure I will. And I'm super excited because these are all exciting, not only in what they're made from, but how they're made.
The Edge of Space. It kind of reminds me, was it Carson that was the edge of wetness?
Yeah, I think so. I was just thinking of Shatner, who just went up to the edge. He was just at the edge of space.
That's right. So, okay, cheers.
Cheers.
Now, this is a very straightforward, no nonsense, basic mead, and basic is not a bad word, but you smell honey right off, or I do, mm-hmm. And then it's nice and cleanly fermented, and you get a nice. You really taste the honey. Mm-hmm. It's not a high gravity mead. I don't think.
No.
Well, it's 10.6% alcohol. I wouldn't have thought that.
Well, but if you're not the wine drinker that I am, so a 10% wine is not terribly strong for wine.
That's true.
And they don't a 10% beer drinks like a load of bricks. I mean, it's big, and you know it. But 10% wine generally doesn't drink all that big. You don't feel like you're just being overwhelmed with it. So when I drank this, the first thing I thought about was, in terms of like what would this drink like if it were a wine? It drinks a lot like a Pinot, not a Pinot, but a Pinot Grigio, like just kind of a nice light Italian, maybe New Zealand style wine. It's not very heavy. It doesn't have a lot going on. There's not layers and layers of flavor in here to me. But the honey comes through really nicely. It's very drinkable. It would be perfect for those kinds of white wine meals like shellfish or pasta. Kind of lighter food would pair very well with this.
Yeah, I was thinking of whitefish.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's very well made, and it's the yeast has been to the edge of space, and it's a beer yeast. So, but the yeast did a really good job, and it obviously wasn't stressed at all because there's no weird phenolics or anything else going on.
Yeah, Nottingham is one of my favorite yeasts. I love using it, and I've used it in a lot of applications, and I've made mead with it as well. It always seems to perform. It just never lets you down, and in this case, it did a great job. I don't know what I would have said that it was. I don't have that kind of palate. Who has that kind of palate? I think this was brewed with a yeast from a goat's tongue. Who knows?
That's next week.
That's next week. But I mean, it's just nice and there's no off flavors. There's nothing estery from the yeast that I can detect. So I guess what I meant was I might have thought that it was just brewed with like 71B or D47. I mean, you just don't know. Now maybe it would have been slightly more alcoholic, slightly drier, because those wine yeasts are going to go a little further. They're not going to kind of die out at around 10 or 11%, where Nottingham will, and I'm sure that was by design. But also, what's well designed about this is that the amount of honey that's in here, so the amount of residual sweetness that's left, is minimal. It's not terribly sweet, but there is some sweetness left. There's the echo of sweetness, like your first love.
This is why I have you here. No, to me, if you were to give me this and not tell me what it is, I would think at first it is a nice dry white wine, but there's that honey component. Yep. That it gives it away. It's not a grapey flavor. It's definitely a honey flavor, and so that gives it away. That it is a nicely made, fairly dry mead, traditional mead. This would be a good example of a mead. If somebody has never tasted a mead before, this would be a good one to start them out on. It's just like, here's just a basic, nice, solid, delicious mead.
Yeah, particularly if they're wine drinkers and they have an idea of what a beverage like this should taste like, and a lot of times people that mostly drink dry wines, French style or California style wines, and you lay a sweet mead on them. Or a sweet fruit wine, they just turn their nose up and say, "Well, that's just crap. It's ugly wine. I don't like that," and that's okay. They don't have to like it, but that doesn't mean it's not well made. So this is a way to introduce people to honey wine, and not have them kind of turn their nose up at, "Well, that's just so sweet. I just can't drink that." Which happens.
Yeah. So good job, Space, and good job, y'all, at Space Time Mead and Cider Works up there. It's a delicious, it's a delicious mead.
I could drink.
Way good.
I'd pay $1 for that.
I'm sure you would. I'm not sure if they would accept that. Awesome. So there you go. We liked it. It's a nice, super clean, well-fermented, just basic table mead. There's nothing super fancy about it, but it was delicious and easily drinkable, and we really enjoyed it. So I'd say again, being in space didn't hurt the yeast.
No, and I'm glad you liked it. I actually like Steve's comments talking about how it was a nice substitute for Pinot Grigio. We look at this one as a nice one to pair with the food. I like almost any meat I design. I try to think about what the cheese I'm going to have with it next. So I definitely I'm a foodie, and I like to have my meads with something to complement with them. And this one is a nice one that will sit and replace that drier grape wine on the dinner table.
Well, very good. It's fall, and it's time to start thinking about making ciders and perries, stuff like that. The next seasonal strain, or the current seasonal strain from Imperial Organic Yeast, has you covered. A40GF Bubbles is a traditional cider strain. Bubbles is a beautiful strain for fruit juice-based fermentations. The clean profile of the yeast, especially when it's used at the lower end of the temperature range, it allows the nuances of the fruit to be prominent in the finished bubbly beverage. This strain is produced on 100% gluten-free media. Now, Imperial doesn't recommend that you use bubbles in wort-based fermentations, but when you see apples or pears available, or cider or fruit juice available this time of year here in the Northern Hemisphere, think of Imperial A40GF Bubbles. We love Imperial with those 200 billion cells in each easy-to-open package. My stir plate is dusty because I don't make starters anymore for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches, and my airlock is usually bubbling before bedtime. Ask your local homebrew store about Imperial Organic Yeast and check them out at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. Well, luckily for us, you sent 3 more as well. Since you're sending stuff, you might as well.
It's a tough life, isn't it?
I know. But you sent us some flavored meads as well. And the first one that we're going to taste is called Meteor Shower. So tell us about Meteor Shower.
Yeah, Meteor Shower, the base of it is an orange blossom honey mead. We make a fairly large batch of orange blossom honey with the intention of adding flavors to it. We do sell it as a show mead, a traditional mead, but we find it's a really fantastic base to highlight some other flavors. So we've done vanilla with it. We've done raspberry, cherry, blueberry. With it, and it really complements those different fruits and spices. So this one we wanted to do something with cocoa. Actually, the cocoa idea was more of a serendipity. We do a coffee mead with this one, and we started working with a new local coffee roaster. They're Mocha Origins. They're out of Honesdale, which is about a half hour away from us. They do ethical sourcing of their coffee and cacao. They want to make sure that their farmers are getting a sustainable income from these products. So they know the growers. They actually sponsor eco trips over to Africa, to Kenya and Cameroon. That we were actually going to go, but stupid COVID has stopped us from deciding to do that this year. So with the coffee they sent us, they gave us some samples of cocoa nibs. And I'm like, okay, well, what are we going to do with them? So I had a bottle of our orange blossom mead, popped the cork, and I dropped a couple grams of the nibs into the bottle and let them sit and taste it every couple days, added a couple more nibs, and really liked the flavor profile. I'm like, okay, we're going to scale this up, and we're going to use all those nibs and make a nice mead.
So what was the proportion? I mean, if you're making, say, a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of a nice sweet mead, how much of the cocoa nibs or the cacao nibs did you put in there?
Yeah, so this is what the base of the mead was. The mead started off at 1125 original gravity. We used D47 for all our orange blossom is the yeast. The final gravity was 1048. So that's a little. We like to try to drive that a little bit lower, but 1048 would make some really nice sweet mead. So in that, it equated to 5 grams per liter, or roughly 0.7 ounces per gallon of cocoa nibs.
Doesn't sound like a whole lot.
No, it really didn't take much to change it. I mean, when I did it so I dropped it into a 750 milliliter bottle, and I think it was it was like initially I put in 2 grams. It wasn't enough, and added another gram, so it was like 3 grams for 750. And actually, this is a good shortcut for folk if they want to try out different flavors instead of doing a whole 5-gallon or 3-gallon or even 1-gallon batch. Just crack a bottle of get 750 bottle and just drop a couple crumbs of whatever into it and see how it is, and then scale up from that.
And did you use, I assume you used some sort of a netting or some sort of filtering or a bag or something to keep those out of the final product?
Yeah, we actually, so this was only what was the batch sizes? So I think this was only a 30-liter batch. So when we were racking it, we just put it through a strainer and captured it. So we weren't too worried about aeration at that point. Otherwise, you could put it in a hop sack. We just dropped them in. I figured first of all, they settled to the bottom of the fermenter. So as we were racking off, most of them sat behind, and then any that was coming through, then we were able to just get out right away. So yeah, again, it was a small batch. Bigger batch, I would have probably put into a hop sack.
So we didn't know what to expect. I mean, because neither one of us had a mead with cocoa nibs in it. But we went bravely forward, and we sampled the Meteor Shower.
Okay, this is Meteor Shower.
Yes, this is a mead made with cocoa nibs. Now, are cocoa nibs the same thing as cacao nibs?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Cocoa nibs added for flavor.
See, I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Yeah, that's really good.
On the other hand, this is much sweeter than the Edge of Space.
Yes.
This is quite sweet. The orange and the chocolate are beautiful together, which are classic, no matter, whether you're baking or making candy, or in this case, making mead. I mean, chocolate and orange are just like a marriage made in heaven. So, and they managed to meld those flavors really nicely in here, and you still get the honey. So, you get kind of a trifecta.
Yeah, it is a lot sweeter, but it's still not syrupy sweet. It's not like, ugh, this is too sweet.
No.
But the flavor reminds me, and you said orange, and we read the description. It's a sweet orange blossom mead with cocoa nibs.
Yeah.
Do you remember the candy, or do you know of the candy that is? It's like a solid. It's a chocolate candy. It looks like a solid orange, and you bang it on the table, and it breaks out into the segments of an orange.
Oh, yeah.
This is kind of like that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Oh, man, I love those things.
But it's not as strong. It's not like,
right.
It just hints at it because there's chocolate in there. But it's not like drinking liquid chocolate. It's not like drinking the Hershey's chocolate syrup. Not that I've ever done that, but...
Well, what impresses me, and I forgot, we did look at the recipe a little before the show, but I had forgotten that it was orange honey. I was thinking that it was flavored with oranges and then flavored with chocolate.
So the orange was so strong that you thought it was maybe flavored with orange, but it's orange blossom honey.
That's right. And so even more kudos because you managed to keep that orange from the honey, prominent, and I definitely taste both flavors. So I would pay $2 for that.
So twice as much as this.
I like this a lot. I think that's a really, really well made mead. I like it a lot.
And I like it. It comes in a smaller bottle, appropriately than the Edge of Space. The Edge of Space is in, what is it, 750 milliliter?
Yeah, that's actually a 1.5 serving at my house. Where the half bottle is a personal serving.
But that's appropriate because this is a more strongly flavored mead that you wouldn't want like a ton.
Yeah, this is kind of more of an after dinner.
Yeah,
it's a dessert.
Yeah. But delicious and well made. So there you go. This one I have to say was, and it might be a spoiler. This one was Steve's favorite.
Oh,
and from our descriptions, describing it as the candy that you bang on the table into, it's not that strong. It's not a novelty mead where it's like, woo, this really tastes like, chocolate orange. It tastes like a mead. It tastes like honey, but there are those notes of chocolate and orange nicely in the background that are not overpowering. They're not on the top, but they are nicely integrated in the whole thing. So you must have been pleased with the way that turned out.
Yeah, I was real happy because when we do this, we want to make sure there's balance there. So we want to make sure there's a honey character there, and this orange blossom honey almost has this to me almost has almost like a slight cereal aspect to it. It's sweet. There's nice characters to that. And the roast that actually the cocoa beans themselves actually almost balance out some of that sweetness that was there initially. So you have the chocolate notes, and you also have some complexity introduced because of whatever compounds are in those cocoa nibs. They're adding a little bit of like if you actually bite a cocoa nib, there's almost a slight bitterness to it, just very slight. And that shows up, and it really adds like almost a full range of flavors from the beginning of the sip, in the middle of the drink, and then the finish. And that's what we strive through. We're winemakers. We want to have that complexity. We want to have that balance, and we're not just trying to make. It's not a chocolate soda wine. And we want the base orange blossom to be present, but also be complemented by whatever we're putting in. In this case, it's the chocolate.
So the next one is the collaboration lavender metheglin. So talk about this one.
Yeah, this one I was afraid to make. We've all had, well, I don't know if we've all had, but I've had lavender meads and used, I think one would describe as grandma's house or
grandma's bathroom.
Grandma's bathroom. Okay. It tastes soapy or something along that line.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is the latest collaboration we did with Honey Hole Winery, and I think I spoke last episode about that I was on about Pete Aiello and Honey Hole Winery. How if it wasn't for him having the homebrew shop 13 years ago, and then that opening up the winery and give me a chance to apprentice, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So we do anywhere from 2 to 3 collaborations a year. We did raspberry, blueberry, cherry, vanilla. And he goes, I have a source of lavender. And I rolled my eyes right away. He goes, no, come on. The person that makes the lavender, she's local. It's culinary lavender. I think it would be really neat. And I'm just talking about, oh my God, Pete, I've had some that I didn't like. I've had some I did like, but I'm afraid because there's a point where it goes from good to too much. So have you ever picked the purple lavender flowers off off the lavender plant?
Individually?
Yeah.
No.
Well, the original, when we were trying to figure out, we were going to do a 90-gallon batch, so that based on message boards and talking to other mead makers, they said it comes out to be roughly we need about 4 pounds of these blossoms. Like, and I'm like, okay, let's do it. So I see what so the person that brought the lavender in, she drops it off, and this was it was Gracie's Lavender Farm. So she brings these 2 big boxes of lavender, the full green stems with all this, the small portion at the top have these purple flowers. I'm like, oh gosh. So Pete down at Honey Hole Winery had a couple college students working with him, helping them lift heavy things, move stuff around, and then we drafted 4 of them to help us pull these little purple demons into hop sacks. We were about 3 hours in, and I just said, you know what, 2.5 pounds is enough. Everyone smelled the best they ever smelled. And the college guys smelled the best they probably smelled in their life. So I said, you guys should go out with your dates tonight because everyone smells like flowers here.
It was able to overpower the Axe body spray.
Oh, yeah, just barely. But yeah. I was pretty adamant about not getting any of the green because my understanding was the green stem is what introduces the soapiness into it. So,
oh, interesting.
1 is get culinary lavender. 2 is just drive yourself crazy by pulling just the purple off and not any of the green. So we put those in hop sacks. We dropped 2.5 pounds into a 90-gallon batch of orange blossom honey. The orange blossom honey was a little bit different. This one actually had a little bit higher gravity and finished a little bit lower. So this one was at a 13.1%. Yeah, 13.1%. So I think the starting gravity was like 1130 and the finished gravity was like 1033. Again, D47, that's the yeast we always use for our orange blossom. And then so we actually did this at Honey Hole Winery. And I said, Pete, we got to check this like every 4 hours. You got to taste it every 4 hours or 6 hours or something. And he's like, what? He goes, yeah, no, there's a point where this is going to go from good to terrible. Now, we do have another like 50 gallons of mead that we could cut it with, but I don't want – we have that. We want to do a coffee mead or something else crazy with that one. So he tasted it. He was tasting it. I don't know if he did it every 6, but I know he called me 24 hours later and he goes, I think it's good enough. And so just pull the sacks out. Just pull them out. We're done. Whatever it is, it's fine. I trust you. And then I went down. I think it was the next day. It was a couple days later because I was working the winery. And tasted it, and like, I think it's beautiful. And he was like, "Yeah, I think we really think we nailed this.
Yeah,
that our perspective is we nailed this." So I'd be anxious to see what you and Steve have discerned about this thing I was most fearful of and actually pretty proud of.
Okay, well, with that, let's dive into the tasting.
This is the collaboration lavender metheglin. I think it's my new favorite. They've gotten better each time so far, but that is delicious.
It's very delicious. I think you're just getting drunker.
Well, that too.
Actually, it's very good. I like it equally well. I like this one and the Meteor Shower a lot. Well, I like them all. They're just different. But boy, that's really that's really good. The honey flavor, it comes through in gangbusters. So they didn't lose the honey, and I get just enough lavender, which, as we all know, you can get carried away with lavender in a heartbeat. But this has just enough that you almost kind of go, "What is that?" You don't really know, and that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah. I don't. I do get more of the orange than I do of the lavender, which again maybe is a good thing. It's not grandma's bathroom,
No.
as I say about lavender, and it's not soapy at all. But the sweetness is nice, and this one's 13.1% alcohol, and I'd be interested to know what the final gravity of that is. But again, it's not cloyingly sweet. It's not like drinking pancake syrup.
No, not at all. It's very well made. I think the clean fermentation. There's no kind of phenolic. I don't know if ester's the right word or not. But there's none of those higher alcohol nastiness. There's no Band-Aid in it.
Right.
None of that kind of stuff. Nothing was stressed out. Super good.
So there you go. This one was my favorite.
Awesome.
I thought it was delicious. I liked all three. The Edge of Space, Meteor Shower, and then this one. But this one, there was something about it that I just really liked it. And the lavender was not overpowering. It wasn't grandma's bathroom in any way. And in fact, I would recommend, if and when you get this one, maybe sample it at room temperature.
Yes.
Or just slightly cooler than room temperature, because that way the aromatics really have a chance to come out, because that's when I was really smelling the lavender, and still, even yet, it wasn't overpowering. So let the mead breathe a little bit, and don't drink it ice cold.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When I'm actually just tasting it again and smelling it now. If you smell this first, you're saying, "Oh my gosh, it's going to be soap in a glass," because the lavender aroma is definitely present. It's there, but when you taste it, one of the first things you get is actually the orange blossom honey comes through, and then the lavender shows up. So again, it's another one that we're pretty happy with how it's a full journey in the mouth. So in the beginning, orange blossom, and then the lavender, and then with some residual sweetness. So real happy we did this. I can't say enough about Pete Aiello and the family and the folk at Honey Hole Winery that challenged us to do some fun stuff.
Yeah, great job. Just taking a moment to talk about our friends and sponsors, Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. They posted on Facebook this week, we are still putting electric brewing systems together during one of the most challenging periods we've faced during the 17 years we've been in business. Blickman vessels are still unavailable, but Spike is an excellent choice. Have you seen Spike gear? Can you picture Spike kettles and such paired with Warthog controllers? Ooh. Or if you want to go the way Steve and I went, you can get a brew-in-a-bag system with the default Bayou Classic kettle, either the 120-volt like Steve's or the bigger 240-volt system like I have. We just love our systems. A Warthog system from HighGravityBrew.com can take the pain out of propane, and if you use the code EBC75BB, you'll save $75 off your Warthog gear. Click on the High Gravity ad on the right-hand side of BasicBrewing.com to see what's covered with the EBC75BB code. You'll love your Warthog system as much as I do. Up your electric brewing game at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. So now we're taking either a left turn or a right turn, depending on your. But we're going off the rails. And the fourth one that you sent is a dry hopped, or I assume it's a dry hopped mead, but it's a hopped mead called Planet Hops. Yeah.
So this one is actually and I'm a pretty much a pain in the butt when it comes down to people when the people say they're brewing mead, because you don't brew mead. You're a winemaker. You don't brew grape wine. You don't brew cider. You make mead. But this one we actually brewed. So this was commemorated 25 years of the Wyoming Valley's Homebrewers Club. We did an event for the 2021 Big AHA Big Brew in May. And so all the different homebrewers, and I've been part of this club since the beginning. It's another reason why I'm in the business, is because the support and the knowledge of the homebrew community, local, it's one thing to have your friends taste your beer, your mead, or your cider. It's another thing to hand it to not strangers, but folk that are passionate about beer, and they are not hesitant, particularly when they had a couple glasses, on telling you where the faults are in your beer. In a constructive way, and that's what you want, because if people don't call you out on what they're getting, you're never going to improve. If everything's good, then I don't have a reason to change my techniques or my ingredients or anything. But if you tell me I get a little bit of acetaldehyde, or I get, some diacetyl or something along that line, all right, I got to do the next one better. So groups like the Wyoming Valley Homebrewers Club, and then locally the Scranton Brewers Guild, and even down the line is Luzerne County Homebrewers. Those folk have been tremendous in making me a better mead maker, a better cider maker, a better wine maker. So I always want to be part of their events, particularly because they're a fun group. So I dug up my brew kettle. I got my chiller out, all the stuff that's been hiatus for the last 3 years since I'm running a winery. And I wanted to make a hop style mead, effectively a gluten-free beer, is what my inspiration was. So we have a local hop farm up the road. It's Avery Mountain Binds and Twines. They're a veteran-owned hop farm, and they do a partnership with what's called Jem's Hop Farm down the road in Carlisle. So they'll share each other's hops. I think Jem's does the pelletization of everyone's hops. So I'll buy some hops off them because they're neighbors, and I want to use Pennsylvania-grown stuff. So he dropped off Triple Pearl hops, and I'm like, all right, what's Triple Pearl good for? And I didn't really know much at all about the hop style, but apparently it's something that lends itself to, I thought, Belgian Pale Ale. So we just dug out Brewing Classic Styles, looked up Jamel's recipe, and then substituted honey for the malt extract.
Huh. So you actually heated this. Did you do a boil?
Yeah. So, I was down there with the kettle. I had my fryer, my burner going. We boiled. We did a 10-gallon batch. I think, what was do I have my gravity numbers here or not? So I made a base 1065. Boiled the honey in the water, and then did my hop additions as we were doing a beer. So we did 4 ounces of the Triple Pearl at 60, 30, and 5. Chilled it down and brought it back up to the winery. Pitched the yeast. Pretty much at that point treated as a mead. So I added a little bit of nutrient, did a little bit of clarification, and just because I'm paranoid about shelf life, I added a little bit of sulfites for stabilization. We then dry hopped it with 2 ounces of Cascades, because when I first tasted the Triple Pearl, it didn't have the hop character I was looking for. So dry hopped it, and then we put it in these cool aluminum bottles, and actually we carbonated it too. There's a little bit of carbonation, not a lot, but there's a little bit of carbonation to be effectively a gluten-free Belgian Pale Ale.
So here we go. Steve and I are taking off to Planet Hops. In the order of the tasting, this is the fourth one. This is the Planet Hops, local wildflower honey, and Triple Pearl hops. I'm not sure that I've ever heard of Triple Pearl hops. Ooh, I smell hops.
Yeah, that's pretty hoppy. Wow, that's so different from the three previous. It's dry.
Yeah, it's 9.7% alcohol, but it's a lot drier. It's the driest thing that we've had, I think.
Yeah, there's no sugar left in there at all. I mean, or if there is, it's not much, but it's very dry. And then the hops, of course, sharpen that. I shouldn't say they dull it, but they sharpen that dryness. Does it say what yeast that was used?
Abbey ale yeast.
Oh, okay. I like it a lot. I almost wish in some ways that we could. This one, I think this one would do the best with food.
Yeah.
It's like I want. I don't know. I want like a burger, or I want a steak, or I want some French fries or something with this.
It's good, but it's not. It's like on Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the others.
That's right.
It's so different from the others that it's kind of like changing gears without a clutch.
Yeah, it's just a completely different animal. The hops are interesting because they're not very fruity. They're not coming. I'm not getting a lot of that kind of lovely citra, mosaic. Whatever your favorite kind of aroma hop is. I'm not getting a lot of that. I'm getting kind of just that dry bittering out of it.
If you're a hophead, if you like IPAs, you would love this because there is a bitterness there. If I was sitting on the side of a stream, like maybe in summer, and I had a cooler, and one of these was in here, I would be super happy. It's so different from the others that I'm kind of having a hard time recalibrating my palate, But the more sips I take, the more it's the more it's working. Like I say, it's well made. The hops are coming through nicely, but it is such a different animal from the others that I'm having trouble recalibrating.
Yeah, it's almost like a disservice to it because stacked up against these others, which were quite even the Edge of Space is a lot sweeter.
I tasted the Edge of Space again just now. Again, delicious. And the Edge of Space, I think, is equally as dry.
I agree.
It's equally as dry, but the hops accentuate that dryness. They make it seem more dry.
It puts a point on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I just had that little sip that of the Edge of Space, that's not sweet. And I think it was about 10, almost 11%. So, in the Edge of Space, and then this one's 9, almost 10%. So they're roughly the same alcohol weight.
Right.
And so not much difference there. But so the sweetness level is about the same, and they're both very dry. But the perception in the Edge of Space was that it still had some residual sweetness to me. That's really good. Again, I'm really impressed with all four of these. The hopped one, what is it? Planet Hops. It's so different than the other three that I almost wish we could have tasted it on another day, even. Yeah. But having said that, it's really well made.
Now we're just gonna pontificate on many things. Thanks, Steve, and again, happy retirement.
Thanks, James.
So there we go, Dan. We like I said, I think we were kind of surprised by by this one. It was so different from the others, and I think that we were expecting more kind of a dry hopped only kind of beverage. And I think that if we had known going in that that this has been boiled and there was actually a lot more bitterness than we had expected, I think that we might have reacted a little bit differently. We liked it, and like I say, it is, like I think I said in the thing, it's kind of an IPA lover's mead, and it's sort of a different animal it's certainly a different animal from the other three, but it's a different animal from other only dry hopped meads that I'd had before.
Yeah, and this idea came from Melavino in New Jersey, Melavino Meadery. He does a number of beer style meads, and so we were inspired. He had a talk. Now I don't think it was the AHA. It might have been the American Mead Makers Association or something. But he's one of these very supportive of up and coming meaderies and the home mead maker community. And he's talking about making beer style meads, and I'm like, all right, if I'm going to a homebrew event, I'm not going to stand around and watch everyone. I'd like to do stuff. And so we're going to make a beer style, effectively a gluten-free beer. And I'm just tasting it now again. And if I would hand this to an IPA lover or a pale ale lover and tell them it's a Belgian style pale, I would bet I would fool them not knowing that there is honey in it. This one does have we did use Abbey ale yeast in this one too.
Yeah, and I think that the boiling probably boiled off some of the, volatile sort of fragile, honey components and made it kind of less honeyish.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
During the process.
It smelled wonderful, and there was a lot of bees buzzing around the brew kettle that day. Like, get away!
That's ours. How did you get that?
I want it back.
Yeah, which kind of, again, it was a switch because the first three of these had those nice. You did such a good job of preserving, those honey components and so delicate, and actually being able to taste the wildflowers, or actually able to taste the orange, and then this is all about the hops, though. It's just a completely different animal. Well, Dan, this has been a whole lot of fun.
I appreciate everything you and Steve do, and I actually want to wish Steve well. I understand he's retired, so I want to wish him a happy and healthy and fulfilling retirement. And I really appreciate everything you do. Again, it's shows like yours that has allowed me to be inspired and try new things and learn and do to actually be able to open a business like this. So thank you very much, James.
Wow, well, you're too kind. And I mean it. I appreciate it. Thanks, Dan. Well, thanks again to Dan for sharing the meads. And thanks to Steve for helping me taste them. I appreciate Dan sharing the details on how those meads were made. Remember, if you go to spacetimemeadworks.com, you can find the Basic Brewing Tasting Pack for a 10% discount. What a fun show! And financial supporters, be on the lookout for the bonus uncut tasting with Steve and me by the end of this week. Goofiness. It's just goofy. We're just happy to be together and sampling some delicious stuff. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.